I mean, that son of a bitch, you know, is really unbelievable.
Mr. Son of a bitch.
I mean,
Mr. Son of a bitch.
His royal. Yes, yeah, no, I never imagined that we'd ever have a president like this, and I hope we don't ever have another president like this again.
Anything to talk about. Kimmel was given each one of them was given a reset except for Seth. I didn't even know he was still on the air.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody did. Everyone's watching Forensic Files.
Yes.
No one's watching Seth.
One of the greatest shows ever.
Yeah, but these guys, they had opportunities to reset. Kimmel could have came back and tried to be funny again, or bring guests again, or show any kind of change, but they're really going to ride this out to the last drop. What are they?
It started like any other morning on daytime TV, light banter, political jokes, and self-congratulation. But then the tension built. A clip of Tyrus and Joe Rogan calling out The View went viral overnight, and by the time the show aired, every host came in ready for war. They weren't debating politics, they were defending credibility. And that's when the battle lines were drawn. Tyrus had gone straight for the jugular. He didn't sugarcoat it. He said what half of America was already thinking. The View had become less a talk show and more a mouthpiece for partisan spin. Joe Rogan agreed, doubling down on his podcast with receipts and context that the mainstream network conveniently ignored. When that segment hit social media, people didn't just nod along, they erupted. The moment those hosts saw the clip, the energy on set shifted. You could see the irritation, the forced laughter trying to mask real anger. Whoopi rolled her eyes, Sonny looked ready to pounce, and Joy tried to turn it into a joke, unsuccessfully. It wasn't comedy anymore, it was exposure. The illusion of moral authority had been pierced live, and everyone watching could feel it. That's what made this so different. This wasn't just media versus media. It was authenticity challenging performance. Tyrus spoke from experience and blunt observation. Rogan, from sheer frustration at selective outrage. Together, they cornered The View's panel into the one thing they hate most: accountability. And once that dynamic started, there was no putting it back in the box. The audience could sense it, not just as spectacle, but as cultural recoil. Too many viewers had grown tired of one-sided outrage lectures disguised as conversation. Tyrus and Rogan didn't start a feud. They ripped the cover off an empire of contradiction. And now, everyone was watching to see how The View would try to recover. You can't understand this blow-up without remembering The View's playbook. For years, they've thrived on outrage. It's the fuel that keeps the cameras rolling. One day it's about conservative women being brainwashed. The next, a celebrity gets accused of moral failure for a joke taken out of context.
Not the party, it's not the majority, it's the loud voices that scare people from saying what they believe and make you think twice about a joke or whatever, these things. And, a lot of their points are valid, but a lot of them are also just repulsive. And I mean, they repel people from, they go like, oh, you're no fun, I don't want to be around you.
If it fits the narrative, it's fair game. If it challenges the narrative, it's dangerous. The pattern isn't subtle. Every time someone like Meghan McCain brought alternative opinions to the table, the chemistry broke down instantly. Heated exchanges turned personal. Political debates devolved into moral sermons. That's the ecosystem Rogan and Tyrus called out. One that rewards applause lines over honest analysis. People keep forgetting how many scandals this show has weathered. Remember when Joy Behar mocked Mike Pence's faith and publicly had to backtrack? Or when Whoopi Goldberg was suspended after her infamous remark about historical persecution? Each time they minimize, redirect, then come back like it never happened. The brand survives not through reflection, but through collective amnesia. And underlying it all is the hypocrisy that Joe Rogan attacked head-on. How The View preaches empathy, but practices exclusion. They speak about healing division, yet demonize half the country live on air. They demand accountability from everyone else, but dismiss their own missteps as misunderstandings. That double standard isn't a bug, it's the code of the show. The outrage is curated, not spontaneous. What Rogan and Tyrus understand is that audiences have evolved. Viewers don't want filtered morality packaged for daytime television. They crave authenticity. The The View lost the moment it became more about winning applause than understanding truth. Every viral argument since 2016 has followed the same arc: headline outrage, selective editing, moral victory lap, and a quiet retreat once the backlash fades. And yet, here we are again.
I've only had, I have one ex-wife. That's it.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, you tell
I had some scruples. Okay? I'll have one night stands, but I will not marry people I don't love, okay? There's certain lines there.
You can't teach this cracker that.
So when Tyrus confronted that cycle directly, people didn't just agree with him. They felt vindicated. Because The View isn't just another show. It's a symbol of the information class that lectures instead of listens. The controversy Rogan highlighted wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a mirror held to years of performative activism and partisan comfort zones. That mirror, once turned around, reflected everything they didn't want America to see. When Tyrus appeared on Fox and delivered his viral takedown, it wasn't a rant. It was clarity wrapped in simplicity. He said, "They call it The View, but there's only one view allowed." That line detonated like a rhetorical grenade. The clip raced across platforms because it captured what millions thought but couldn't say. Within hours, Rogan brought it up on his podcast, calling the show scripted moral theater, and what followed was a media earthquake. You could practically hear The View's production staff scrambling behind the scenes. The next morning, their segment opened with defensive humor. Joy cracked a line about late-night tough guys. Whoopi dismissed it as noise. But the laughter didn't land. The tension was palpable, that kind of brittle humor that comes right before a storm. Then Sunny Hostin fired back, accusing conservative commentators of cherry-picking moments to push political division. That's when the audience groaned. The energy shifted completely. Rogan had receipts, though. On his next episode, he played clips side by side. The View's moral outrage over misinformation compared with their own false claims about politicians and vaccines. He didn't yell, he didn't embellish, he just showed the footage and let hypocrisy speak for itself. The silence from The View after that wasn't professional restraint. It was shock. Tyrus, meanwhile, used the moment to go even deeper. He framed it not as a left versus right issue, but as a question of honesty in media culture. He talked about how Americans no longer trust the people who tell them what to think and how The View, once meant to reflect diversity of thought, now punishes deviation. His phrasing was sharp enough to slice through the PR defenses. It used to be a table for different voices. Now it's an echo chamber with studio lighting. That line spread faster than any of his previous commentary. Audiences clipped it, shared it, quoted it in comment sections. The reason? It hit a cultural nerve. It described what millions of viewers had slowly realized. When shows claim moral high ground but fail their own standards, they lose more than an argument, they lose credibility. And once credibility is gone, no amount of applause signs or slogans can rebuild it. That's when things turned procedural. ABC's internal sources leaked that producers were panicking, trying to choose between ignoring Rogan or confronting him. Either choice risked disaster. Silence would look like guilt. Responding might amplify his critique. According to insiders, the hosts were told to stay above it, but off camera, tempers spilled over. One producer reportedly said, "He exposed the game, and everyone knows it." By the end of that week, the cultural fallout was complete. Clips of Tyrus's commentary were trending alongside Rogan's analysis, while The View struggled to regain footing with feel-good stories that no one bought. The public saw through the choreography. They sensed the fatigue of hosts pretending not to care about the criticism that everyone else was talking about. Rogan didn't need their platform, Tyrus didn't need their validation, but The View, the show that built its identity on public perception, suddenly looked defensive, dated, and brittle. And for the first time in years, daytime television's loudest voices found themselves on the wrong side of the conversation. The exposure wasn't just about TV hosts. It was about what happens when performance meets truth. And truth, finally, wins. Joe Rogan didn't just echo Tyrus's point, he detonated it into the mainstream. On his next podcast, he dissected the View's reaction bit by bit. He paused their laughter, replayed their dismissive jokes, and called them out for what they were: nervous deflections. The irony wasn't lost on him. A panel that built its brand on fearless dialogue suddenly couldn't handle being challenged. That contradiction gave him all the fuel he needed. He wasn't yelling, he was surgical. Rogan walked listeners through years of the show's selective outrage, contrasting how they treated political allies with how they smeared critics. They act like the guardians of truth, he said, but only when the truth agrees with them. That line ricocheted across social media, clipped and captioned as proof that someone had finally said what millions had been thinking for years. His point went beyond entertainment. Rogan connected it to a cultural fatigue with institutions pretending to be neutral arbiters of reality. Whether it's late-night comedy or daytime talk shows, audiences see through the bias now. When The View attacks opponents and then cries foul when criticized, it looks less like journalism and more like brand maintenance. Rogan presented the evidence, not as gossip, but as a case study in the decay of media trust. By the middle of that week, Rogan's commentary had more reach than a full segment of The View. Clips from his podcast flooded TikTok, Reddit, and Twitter, each one cutting to the heart of the hypocrisy. He played contrasting sound bites, The View condemning misinformation on one day, then spreading unfounded claims the next. The side-by-side comparison was devastating. It punctured their moral posture. People weren't just laughing, they were cataloging contradictions. And this is where the tone shifted from criticism to exposure. Rogan pointed out that when The View's hosts face backlash, they hide behind language about context and nuance, excuses they never extend to others. He called it designer accountability, a brilliant phrase that stuck instantly. Memes appeared overnight, tagging it to every The View contradiction from the past 5 years. What made Rogan's words resonate wasn't just the critique, it was the credibility gap he illuminated. He reminded listeners that viewers used to trust TV hosts more than podcasters. Now that equation's reversed. People believe the long-form conversations, not the filtered talking points.
I think if they're going to continue to do a podcast, they need to bring their writers in. Ooh. Because that was brutal.
Terrible. They're out of touch.
It's like listening to two billionaires complaining about no one had change for their $100 bill at McDonald's. You know?
That reversal signaled something deeper, power shifting from legacy media to independent voices. Rogan didn't present himself as righteous. That's what made him dangerous to The View. He laughed off accusations that he was punching down, saying, "They're the biggest daytime show on national TV. I'm one guy with a mic." The simplicity of that argument unsettled his critics. He represented the everyman with a platform, something The View could neither dismiss nor outspin. And when Tyrus later joined another Fox segment to respond to Rogan's coverage, the synergy was unmistakable. They didn't coordinate, but they didn't need to. Their arguments converged naturally: media hypocrisy, selective morality, and the illusion of inclusivity. Together, they formed a narrative no PR team could smother. The internet decided who looked authentic, and it wasn't the people reading from cue cards. Back in ABC's studio, the mood turned volatile. The hosts had seen the Rogan clips. They knew their reputations were being shredded in real time, and the morning meeting was chaos. One insider described it bluntly: they wanted to hit back, but no one agreed on how. What followed on camera felt like damage control wearing makeup, forced smiles cloaking irritation. Whoopi opened the show with a monologue about critics who live online, spreading division, a transparent jab at Rogan. But it rang hollow. The audience didn't cheer. You could sense they weren't buying it. Then Sunny tried to pivot, framing the situation as a coordinated attack on women with platforms. That narrative collapsed instantly when Joy muttered, "But weren't we the ones who started talking about him first?"
All still love.
Right.
And they're just sizing each other up, trying to figure out which one of us has the best shot to get back with him.
Yes.
They all get together, they compare notes, and they tell each other, yeah, you should never mention his name again. You should never mention his name again. You should never. Does he call you? Doesn't call me? He texted me last week. Oh, so I'm still in the game. That's all this was.
The crowd laughed awkwardly, and the moment exposed the confusion. Behind the scenes, producers were torn. Some urged them to ignore it, others wanted to strike back harder. What aired next was a patchwork segment about media integrity, a thinly veiled self-defense that sounded more desperate than confident. Whoopi raised her voice, saying that Rogan and others profit from tearing women down. But by then, the internet was already replaying her old clips mocking other female politicians on air. The hypocrisy was too obvious to hide. Tyrus seized on that. On his next appearance, he played their responses side by side with their past comments. He didn't need commentary, the contrast did the talking. Laughter from The View, next to moral outrage from The View. A mirror of contradictions. It wasn't political, it was psychological. The show's entire credibility was eating itself alive. Rogan, predictably, couldn't resist responding. On his next episode, he said, half joking, "If your first instinct to criticism is to cry sexism, maybe the critique hit closer than you want to admit." That line burned through social feeds instantly. It wasn't just shade, it was a checkmate. Hosts who accuse everyone else of fragility were now melting down on national television. By the week's end, public reaction eclipsed anything The View could contain. Memes cast Whoopi as a gatekeeper of truth, while late-night commentators joined in, mocking their defensive posture. Even some of their usual allies in media urged them to take the L gracefully. But The View couldn't. This was survival instincts playing out live. Instead of reflection, they doubled down. They brought on a segment titled "Fighting Back Against Misrepresentation," accidentally proving Rogan's point. The room went silent when one host asked, "Do people even believe us anymore?" No one answered. That silence wasn't scripted. It was existential. For the first time, The View felt cornered not by critics but by transparency. They were reacting, not leading. And in TV culture, perception is everything. Once you lose the illusion of control, you lose the audience's faith. The public reaction was swift, brutal, and unfiltered. Hashtags like #Viewgate and #designer. Accountability trended for days, each post more sarcastic than the last. Commenters across ideological lines agreed on one thing. The View's response looked out of touch. People mocked the disconnect between the panel's moral preaching and their defensive tantrum. It became a cultural Rorschach test for trust in mainstream media. Clips comparing Rogan's calm delivery to the host's outrage flooded timelines. Users posted side-by-side screenshots. Rogan speaking casually into a microphone, while The View hosts scolded viewers from behind their desk. The contrast told a story of its own. Authenticity versus performance. Unfiltered talk versus corporate spin. Even celebrities chimed in. Comedians, political commentators, and former guests of The View posted subtle but unmistakable digs. One popular tweet said, "Imagine getting called out by a podcaster and proving him right in the same week." It hit millions of impressions before the network's PR team could respond. The show's Instagram comments turned into open revolt. Fans who once praised the hosts started calling them out-of-touch elites. Within days, ABC quietly turned off comment sections for several clips. That move only intensified the backlash, confirming for many that they couldn't handle criticism. Meanwhile, Rogan's and Tyrus's audiences surged. Their clips became digital trophies in a larger conversation about free expression. People weren't just backing personalities, they were declaring a shift in trust. The message was clear. Media credibility now belongs to whoever's willing to tell uncomfortable truths, not whoever controls the microphone. By the end of the week, even The View's loyal base looked conflicted. The attempt at moral reclamation had backfired. Public sentiment wasn't swayed by studio lighting or applause tracks anymore. It was swayed by authenticity, and The View, stripped of its authority, stood exposed under daylight it couldn't spin. In the end, it wasn't just The View that got exposed. It was the entire blueprint of selective outrage that daytime television depends on. Tyrus and Rogan didn't invent the critique, they crystallized it. Their exposure forced a cultural audit. Who claims moral authority and who earns it? The hosts clung to rhetoric, while the critics offered reality. That's the divide audiences felt deep down. The real story wasn't about hurt egos, it was about authenticity versus agenda. When discussion becomes performance, truth becomes collateral damage. Tyrus showed how easily principles bend under studio pressure. Rogan showed that credibility thrives outside the system. Together, they stripped the varnish from media sanctimony. Every viral moment since then has fed one truth. People can spot dishonesty faster than ever. The View's reaction wasn't brave, it was habitual, but habit won't save them now. Once viewers realize their trust has been traded for applause, they don't return. So who was truly exposed? Not just the hosts, but the illusion they built. Authenticity won that war, and the audience made the verdict permanent.